comedy is an art that we learn from rejection.
Back in the late 90s, Duncan Trussell tried his hand at stand-up comedy.
As I'm walking off stage, feeling the kind of victory that you can only feel when you have no sense of what you're doing. This kind of horrible hubris, just just the relief of having done it.
Yeah.
And not thinking about the content of what I was saying.
A waitress named Eleanor Kerrigan wandered amongst the crowd. She was busy filling orders, but for a brief moment, she stopped.
She's like, Duncan. And I turn, all of my ego and overdrive, imagining, here it comes. This is the big compliment. I guess I was born for this. She looks at me, she goes, I don't know what it was you did up there, but it wasn't comedy. That was the beginning.
So what did you do?
What I did is I for the first time I felt if your heart had feet, somebody put concrete boots on the feet of your heart and threw it in a very deep, cold ocean, But I think just the fact that she took the time to insult me like that, it was like the beginning of a teaching.
Eleanor, the waitress, is now a professional comedian. And despite that painful night, so is Duncan. You might recognize his voice from stand-up comedy specials, Drunk History, his popular podcast, The Duncan Trussell Family Hour, or from his new Netflix show, The Midnight Gospel. But it took a lot of soaking up awkward audience silences and ingesting psychedelics before Duncan was able to discover himself and the ultimate drug. I'm Doug Frazier, and this is What We Do, where we'll meet the people behind the most intriguing passions, hobbies, and jobs around the world. A few months before that fateful stand-up comedy night, Duncan was packing the last of his things in North Carolina. His grandmother had recently passed and left him $10,000. And so Duncan decided to move to LA.
I don't know what I was thinking, really. And I just came to LA because I thought it'd be cool. Ended up spending a lot of that money on synthesizers and LSD.
With his funds depleted, Duncan needed to find a job. Enter his drug addict landlord.
My landlord, who was a literal crackhead, addicted to crack cocaine. I remember at one point he invited me into his house. I remember he was there with a friend, and they were both smoking crack. I don't know if you've ever smelled crack. It's like crack is telling you not to smoke crack. Just like this breath of the devil. One of his friends is smoking it. His lips are blue, and he looks at me with the most horrific sincerity. It's like he looks at me like he's in the trenches of some very heroic war and says, if my heart stops, you must be the one to call 911. And it was just chilling and hilarious. His heart didn't stop, thank God. And I don't think he's ever stopped smoking crack. I don't know. But regardless, my landlord had given me this tour of LA, which, by the way, was beautiful and nostalgic.
In the years since the turn of the century, Los Angeles has grown from a sleepy pueblo to a vast, seething metropolitan city.
Every little piece of LA meant something to him, and he passionately drove by the Comedy Store and pointed it out to me and just said, that's the place. That's where real comedy happens, that place. And he was so excited about it, and I just thought, whoa, that building looks crazy. It's just black. It's like a black temple or something.
Duncan was sold. He had no intention of doing stand-up comedy. He just thought it'd be a fun place to work. So he put together a resume, which consisted of poorly produced prank calls he made in college.
This is like the place Richard Pryor came from. You know what I mean? Like they're going to be like, oh, yeah, you. Oh, yeah, these prank calls. My God, please come work here.
I mean, maybe it's just me, but I feel like prank calls have left the world. Where did they go? Like, what's going on?
Man, to do a successful prank call that people can listen to and really enjoy, if you have something in there that, like, it sounds like somebody's getting their feelings hurt or if it's mean or anything like that. It just makes you look like a dick.
Yeah.
When we were doing prank calls, this was prior to the existence of the internet as we know it. And so the vileness of trolling, there was still some novelty to it because a prank call is just trolling, you know? One of the prank calls we did, I called this guy to tell him I was, I don't know, an electrician or something. I don't even remember what it was. We were stoned in a dorm room. He said, well, there's been a squirrel hanging on the line outside my house, and I think it's been affecting our power. And then, I'm like, I said, so I don't remember what it was. We were coming out and shooting the squirrels. They've been attacking people. And then somehow this man all of a sudden starts talking about Jesus. But he's not talking about Jesus like an evangelist or, he's like a real Christian. And you hear his voice, his sweetness in his voice. He died for us. He loved us so much. And it was just, I hear it. I hear that voice now and feel awful about that prank call.
No.
It's like Christ came through that man and like gave me a mild spanking. It didn't stop me from doing the prank calls, but I certainly feel guilty about it.
Duncan's prank call compilation worked to get him a job at the Comedy Store. Sort of.
They just eventually got annoyed because I kept calling them, and they let me start working there.
How did you go from working at the Comedy Store to the stage?
If you worked at the Comedy Store, you get this coveted 3-minute spot on Sundays in the original room. Every Sunday, and I think Monday now, the Comedy Store has an open mic. The open mic is very difficult to get on. There are lines of people who come in. There's some kind of horrible lottery. If your name gets picked, which it probably won't, then you will go up at some point on a Sunday night for 3 minutes. To me, it's one of the most beautiful things. And it really speaks to how passionate people are about it, because these people will suffer for years just for a chance to get seen on that stage.
He wasn't interested in his 3 free minutes on stage that came from working there. The comics who found out about this were dumbfounded.
Because it seemed crazy that, wow, you should just do it. I'm like, I don't know. I'm not a comic. I don't think I want to do that. And then I think over time, just getting to know some of the comics there, I thought, maybe I'll give it a shot. And I tried it.
As he walked off stage from his first set, well, you know what happened.
She looks at me and she goes, I don't know what it was you did up there, but it wasn't comedy. I bombed so much. At one point, I was sitting with my friend Jason in his apartment crying because I had bombed, I think, 11 times in a row. And not like, a couple laughs here or there, but like silence. Like, I think my friend Ari, at one point when I got off stage, stopped me and looked at me and he said, "Are you all right?" So it was brutal.
Duncan wasn't living in that brutality alone. The trial by fire he and the other comedians faced every time they stepped on stage was nurtured by a culture of honesty. The Comedy Store's co-founder, Mitzi Shore, believed that was the only way to grow as artists.
If you're going to become a comedian, you need that. You don't need people telling you that you're funny when you're not. In fact, Mitzi said that's basically the cruelest thing you can do to a person. The learning curve is a kind of cosmic pull-up bar. And anytime you encounter that pain of whatever it is you're challenging yourself with artistically, that burn that's the fire of the divine, baking you in the kiln of time. And it's the best thing ever, even though it sucks.
Duncan trudged forward through the grueling creative process with a little help from psychedelics. Just watching the trailer of The Midnight Gospel, his animated show on Netflix he conceived with Adventure Time creator Pendleton Ward, you may wonder, What the hell were they on when they made that?
Merging with simulator in 3, 2, 1.
The show follows Clancy, who's living in the chromatic ribbon dimension, where he interviews people for a spacecast, which is essentially that universe's version of a podcast. But with one big difference. The dimensions of the people he interviews are each experiencing their own apocalypse, which Clancy accesses through a forbidden multiverse simulator.
Which universe will you choose today?
The interviews on the show are based on actual interviews Duncan conducted on his Earth podcast, the Duncan Trussell Family Hour. The Midnight Gospel is a trippy journey, mixing offbeat humor, comedic violence, and thought-provoking conversations, all wrapped up with a psychedelic bow.
When I was younger, I remember laughing my ass off because the DEA, they showed how the way that LSD filtered through the country was exactly whatever tour route the Grateful Dead was taking. In a particular year. and then also what they were saying is that the difficulty in busting LSD dealers is that at some point the supply chain begins to melt down because the dealers are taking the acid, and the more LSD that they're taking, the less they want to sell it, and the more they start giving it away. And so the whole thing melts itself down and transforms itself into something that transcends capital.
How have your experiences with psychedelics helped shape the stories you tell, such as with the Midnight Gospel?
Well, a lot. I was at Burning Man, and somebody offered me some DMT, and you know, I'd experienced DMT a little bit in the past, but I don't think I'd ever had the real dose because it's terrifying. DMT is this kind of rocket ship that you have to get it to blast through whatever the membrane is between the main reality tunnel we call, you know, human life and that other world. You really do have to take a lot of deep inhalations of a pretty painful smoke. I did it, and I looked around, and I before, being inhaled into what could only be the mind of God or some cog in the great eternal machine that is the simulator running this thing, I saw this creature that looked like a cow, but it had a technological lantern head that was glowing this beautiful green phosphorescent light. And then I looked away and looked back, and it was still there. That was, to me, mind-shattering, just because my experience with psychedelics has been that whatever particular thing I'm seeing with my eyes closed or open, it has the quality, a kaleidoscopic quality that changes. You look away and look back, the thing's not supposed to be there anymore. So that made its way into the show. For me, the visionary states that are accessible to us via psychedelics are very precious things. I like to imagine that we're all a kind of antenna for the divine, and that if we are lucky, if we have some kind of discipline, we can tune into a signal that will come through us temporarily. If you can become a kind of translator between that realm and this realm, then lots of times that translated message can be really inspirational for other people and very healing for people. Not that a lantern-headed thing is going to heal anybody, but I certainly, find it empowering to be out of the psychedelic closet and admit that I use visions from a variety of different psychedelics in most of anything I create.
Inspiration for art can come from anywhere. A good book, a long walk in an unexplored neighborhood, or a touch of psychedelics. But inspiration is the easy part. It's the hours you pour into the work that help make you and your art better. But how do you measure success?
The problem is right now, our metric for being a successful artist is quantifiable for a lot of people based on fame or money or selling your stuff or publishing or, vast publishing or something like that. And I just did this interview with Sharon Salzberg.
Sharon is a New York Times bestselling author and a teacher of Buddhist meditation practices.
And she said she heard the Dalai Lama say that they don't look at art like that. Their metric for whether an artist's creation is successful is how much it transformed the artist during the process of creation.
That's big.
That's big. That's big.
Duncan experienced that transformation firsthand through stand-up comedy.
Once you start getting comfortable on stage and becoming yourself, that's almost a naturally funny situation because it's just who you are. That's the weird Zen teaching of stand-up comedy, is that you spend all this time trying to be Andy Kaufman, George Carlin, Bill Hicks, whoever it is that you love. You spend all this time just to become yourself on stage.
That lesson carries over into other aspects of Duncan's life, far beyond the arts.
I love to create. I loved making Midnight Gospel. I love making my podcast. But this has created an imbalance in my life in the sense that I'm a dad and I have a wife and a family. And as easy and seductive as it may be to rationalize that I support our family via the art, it's a ridiculous thing to think because I'm being supported by the love of my wife and the space she holds for me to do the art within. And so now I'm realizing, oh, wow, this is it too. This is also a form of self-perfection through service to your family. And then you start realizing, whoa, the whole thing is a kiln. It's not the kiln of comedy, the stage, the writing, the podcast, but the entire experience of being a human itself and the friction created anytime you run into aversion to what's happening right now. That is, I think, what drives the at least personal evolutionary process.
Finding the perfect external factors often hold us back from moving forward in our own evolutionary process. Things like wanting to be in the perfect location or finding the ideal meditation pillow, or even psychedelics.
None of those things necessarily matter. They're just reflections of what you already are. This sounds like some kind of say no to drugs bullshit, and it isn't. But to me, the ultimate transformative psychedelic there is conversation. For me, the path of conversation through my podcast, it's melted me down. It's transformed me. It's evolved me and taught me so much. And so I really mean that, like, if you really want to trip out, find someone who has something about them that you love and sit down with them for an hour and just talk without looking at your phone. And over time, that will change you in a way that I don't know what else can do that.
If Duncan's teachings began with the insult at the comedy club, the lessons continue in less abrasive dialogues with others. Conversation affords us the chance to sink into the depths of ourselves and each other. There, we're able to pull countless files of experiences from our minds and sift through them with another human being, a lover, a friend, a complete stranger. The beauty of conversation is it knows no limits, no matter who you're talking with. It'll take you as far as you're willing to go. The joy of writing stand-up comedy or television shows isn't just in the process of creating and evolving, but also in seeing how the end result can make someone laugh, cry, or even give them the tools they need to set out on their own journey of discovery. Because when we share our personal wisdom and follies with others in conversation, the universe trips out. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening. Would you mind leaving a rating and review for the show? It only takes a moment and it's a huge help. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. Until next time, stay curious. What We Do is produced by me, Doug Frazier, for WHRO Public Media.